Hey guys, so since the time I recorded my last video, I modified, or rather I added new functionalities to the framework. And today I would like you to today I would like to explain those changes to you so that you can also implement in your framework. So first and foremost, I will talk about the framework state which we had when I recorded the video, my last video. So let me switch to the branch where I had the previous code. So it is in the master. So I'll go to master branch. So I am switched to master branch, and this is where I recorded my last video. And in my last video, if you remember, we talked about extend report, I guess. And for extend report implementation, we had added all these files. So I think you guys have already implemented that. But let me just walk you through again on what we had in our framework, and then I'll talk about what changes I made. So this was our first test case and only test case. And guys, we are only keeping one test case for now, and soon enough we are going to scale it up. Right now we are not scaling or not adding more test cases because we want our framework to be up and running with all the basic minimum functionalities a framework should have. So right now all our activities are towards framework development. A framework, once the framework is developed to its fullest extent, then we are going to scale it up. Or maybe few things we're going to add later in the framework, but we need to make a framework which is at a minimum required, or which we can call a minimum required framework. Right now we don't have it. For example, we didn't have reporting, so we implemented reporting. We also lacking reusable useful utility methods. So the changes which I've actually made are related to that. So first let me walk you through on the changes which we, or the state of the application which we had earlier. And right now I think you guys are all on at this stage. So let me just walk you through first quickly. So this was our test case. This will remain as it is. For this we wrote step definitions. If you remember, these were our step definitions. So in these step definitions we implemented page object model. So I think that this also you guys have done. So this is page object model here. And if you notice, we made a change in this page object in the last video where we are passing driver as well as scenario object. So scenario object and driver is what we are passing. Why we are passing this scenario object? The primary objective of this is that we also want this to be available inside the page object model file, because in all likelihood there's a possibility that we might be required to take screenshots, okay, or required to write some logs in the report inside this. And only way in Cucumber to embed the report, embed the screenshot and write logs in the report is using scenario. And it's not like it's the only way. As of the way we are developing our framework, this is the object which we are using for entering the screenshot in the report as well as writing logs in the report. So that's the reason I'm passing driver as well as scenario object inside my common page, or maybe in all the page object model. And I think the search page objects right now I'm only passing driver, but here also I would have to modify to make it so that this class accepts scenario object as well. And to do that, if you go inside this, to do that I am using a constructor. Inside the constructor I am defining or assigning these two variables. These variables are defined at the top, and this is how I am initializing it, and then I'm using it here. Okay. This is what we had, or this is what we currently have, or you have. So I have made few more changes in this in our framework. So what I've done is I have added a library. Now that library is, I have named it as interaction library or interact library. The purpose of that library is, or right now I'm calling it as a library, but don't get confused. It's a simple class. That's it. That's all it is. So inside that class, I have added lot of methods which deals with various UI operations. So for example, if I want to click on something, I have created a method called as click. Okay, click element. If I want to send some keys to a text box, I have created a method called as set keys. If I want to take a screenshot, I have created a method called as take screenshot. If I want to get a attribute from somewhere, some element, I am calling a method as get attribute. Now we'll talk about why I did that, but first let's see how I achieved that. Okay. So the why part, you will gradually understand why I did it. Just to make things more simplified for the person who is automating the test case, right? And to have a more centralized approach or more manageable approach is what I've done it. But you might not understand as of now why I've done it. But if you follow the steps which I've done, or follow the framework, maybe soon enough you will understand why I've done it. And I'll try my best to explain the reason behind it. But first, now let me just tell you the changes which I've made, right? So I could either try to do it here, or I could just switch to the branch where I made the changes, and then I will explain. All you need to remember right now is that we had a driver here, we had a scenario here, then we were doing something like this. And if you remember, and if you can also see, set search text box and click on search element, I'm using find element and performing the operation, the same is what I'm doing here. Okay. Just one more point on why part. So for example, if we discussed that in the send keys section, in the set search text box method, I was doing send keys, but before that I implemented a explicit wait. Now I would have to do this everywhere. So for example, I want to have the synchronization implemented. So before I click or set something, I would have to do this, right? And this is causing a duplicacy of code. All right. Now tell me a way, or maybe you can tell me something, or something which I can do something like this. So public void, or I will write set, or maybe set element web element e. So maybe let's assume I have created a method called a set element. Okay. Now this set element, now this set element becomes a reusable method for me. Okay. Or maybe instead of web element, I'll just say by, maybe something like this. Okay. And then what I'll do, I will say driver dot find element. Okay. I will just copy this from here. I'll paste it here. That will be much better. Okay. And this by is what I'm going to put here. This by, I will just put it here, and I will put it here, right? So this becomes my reusable method. So some methods like these is what I've created inside my interact library. So the benefit of this would be, if I just remove this from here, and I will just call the method called as set element, and I will, this was a click, right? So maybe this is the object. Now this looks, first thing, this looks way too simplified. Okay. Secondly, I don't have to actually implement this wait synchronization in all the methods. Assume, let's say in this class we had one more click operation, click on some more button, click on some more button, for example, right? So I could have just called, I can just again call this method. Okay, this method I could call again. By the way, this is set element. I was supposed to be writing a click element. Let me correct that mistake, otherwise you might get confused unnecessarily. So this is what it is. So every time you want to click on something, you're going to call this reusable method. Now this makes things very, very manageable, because the central, this click element which is there is responsible for clicking on all the elements, and you can control the execution flow or control the click event across your framework. So no matter in which object repository, or no matter in which object page object class you are in, wherever there's a need to click on an element, you're going to call the same method. Now this is how you achieve a centralization approach or manage. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. So this click element which you have here can be seen or perceived as a centralized location, which is responsible for all the click operations for a framework. And this is how we achieve maintainability of the code. So your, things will not be loose in your framework. So this is a loose code which is being repeated again and again for all the element. If we follow this approach, wherein for each element we are writing this synchronization code, and then for each element we are writing this this kind of operations. Okay, so this will cause some issues later in terms of manageability of the code, right? If you kind of centralize it and reuse the same method again and again and again, if you want to make some changes for specific changes for the click operation, all you have to do is to make changes in one method. For now, this is kept here, so it's of no use because no other class can use it unless it makes objects of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a separate class, and separate class I'm going to rename it as interact class, and I'm going to create such methods there, and I'm going to call these methods from the centralized class, right? So this is what actually I have done, and I'm going to show you that now without wasting further time in explaining things theoretically. So let me switch to that branch right now. Maybe I will just do a head revision. So this in Eclipse, if you want to reset what the changes which I have done, you can just do a replace with and click on head revision. So this actually discards all the changes which you have made. So it removes everything from here. And if you don't do it, it will not allow me to make a switch. So I want to switch to a different branch in which I have made changes. So this is interaction library impl is where I have done it. Right, so let me show you the new structure which we have. I also made some structural changes, by the way. So this was our test case, nothing changed here. Then there is a new package called as context. So this is nothing being changed here because I just moved the class from bottom from API to here. So if you're not working on API as of now, you can ignore this. We anyway is going to use this later, but for not for this specific video. Now let's come to the page object, or rather let's come to the step definitions first. So I'm here, I will go to my step def. If you notice, I have this this step definition called as I search for product as, right? And this is object called as common page objects. I have the same changes which I made here is this. So search page objects as well as common page objects now accepts driver as well as scenario object, right? Scenario object is what I've defined here at the top. All right, now if I go inside this, you will see that change. Right now, if you see, it's very, very clean. So same class I was talking about previously, and it was looking very messy. Of course, there was some commented code there, but I have removed many things from here. So if you notice, I have removed the driver from here. If you also notice, I have called the methods set element and click element directly, and I'm not writing any boilerplate code, something like synchronization and all. Why? Because if I go inside this set element, it takes me to a class called as interact class. Okay. Now inside this interact class, by the way, I've also implemented log4j here, but let's not talk about it as of now. Let's just focus on this interact class. So the interact class has an instance variable called as driver. It's marked as private. These are its getter and setter. So to access driver, to set driver, I'm going to call set driver. To get driver, I'm going to call get driver. So this is how I'm going to access this get drivers, basically using setter and this getter. Now all the elements which we talked about, so click element, set element, get attribute, get list of web elements. So here I'm using find elements. Okay. Take screenshot, different overloaded methods of take screenshot is also here. Right now this is not full list. We have way more operations for to be done on UI. So there are double clicks, there is hover, mouse overs, whatever new thing or new interaction we would like to do on our application, we are going to add that method first here, and that is what we are going to refer inside our page object model files. And then page object model files will go to the step definitions, right? So I'll also try to create a flow of or the layers of this framework maybe in the same video. But let me just finish this explanation. So this is our interact class. What you have to do is you have to call this. I'm not expecting you guys to write it on your own completely. If you want to do it, you can, but I guess don't waste time doing that. Just copy this from my library, from my Git repository, and paste it in your and start using it. So you don't have to write all the code which I'm writing. All you have to do is, so this is the case which you don't have to actually write it. I'm creating this library. I'm going to add more and more methods here. All you have to do is to learn how will you call it, right? So there are two ways to do it. Either you create an object of it, right? I have marked this at abstract. So you really can't do that. So what I have to do is, what I have done here is I have extended this. So this is an interact class, and I have extended this class to all the page objects. So the idea would be the way framework would work is, whatever page object model file you will create, every class or every page object model class will actually extend the interact class. So all the methods which are available inside this interact class will be accessible in your page object model file, and then you can directly use it. So if you notice here, the driver which was previously defined here, I have moved that inside the interact class. So I have moved that driver here. If you want to access it, you can use get driver. If you want to set it, you will use set driver. Second change is, in the constructor, if you notice, previously we were writing this dot driver equal to driver. Right now I'm doing set driver. This is the set driver method, which is doing a simple job of setting. So driver which is being sent from outside, it's actually setting it here. Okay. Then set search text box. In this, I am not writing driver dot find element. All I'm doing is calling a method called a set element, and it's by implementation. Search text box, it's a by object. I'm passing it inside, and set element is actually what it's doing. It is first of all waiting for it, and then it is clicking on it. Okay. And by the way, it is also returning. It's also returning the element. All right. So right now it's of no use as of now in my page object model file, but you know, sometimes if someone needs it, you can directly access it like this. So web element, and this will be the element which was set by this set element method. It's going to be, the set element method is going to return that element, and you can save it here. Right now it is of no use because it's a simple operation called a set element, which is you know using which I am setting the text box. So right now this return is of no significance, but for later use or someone, let's say, later want to use it, I am just marking it as I'm just returning the element on which operation is being performed. Yeah, so same I am doing for search page objects. Same thing I'm doing here. So here, if you notice, previously it was driver.find elements and then product list. I'm calling a method called as get list of web elements. Now this is where I am directly writing. First of all, I'm doing a synchronization, and then I'm returning element.find elements. I'm returning a list of web elements. So I'm effectively doing the same thing what I was doing earlier. It's just more manageable code and more the code which can be reused again and again in different page object model files. So this is what is important for a good framework, that you have a centralized repository or centralized library which whose method you can access in all the subsequent page object model files, right? So this is what I would insist you guys to use. Okay. And one last thing from my side is to just tell you, I know this could be a little bit confusing, but the more you use it, the more you try to implement it, the better you will going to understand it. Okay, so let me just share my whiteboard, and I will tell you the layers of framework, the layers in our framework. So this is also you can use to explain. Someone asks you explain your framework. This is bit. This could be part of your answer which you're going to give for this question. So let me just draw it. So this is your first layer. This is your second layer. This is your third layer. I don't know if you have a fourth layer or not. Let me just see. So your first layer actually is your feature file. So everything will be driven from feature file. So you write a statement, there is a feature file. Second layer is your step definition classes. right? These are your second layer. So second layer methods are kept here. Then this becomes your, if I go further down, this becomes your page object model layer. All right. And then we do have one more, which is your interact class, right? So this is your interact class, right? So the way it works is, you write feature file. Feature file actually in short calls step definition classes and their methods. The step definition classes and methods are not doing things on their own. They are actually calling the page object model files, page object model classes. Inside page object model classes, you have methods which are actually not doing the job. They are actually calling interact class methods. All right. And the interact class methods are actually doing the operations on your UI. So if I also draw a UI, this is your UI, and your interact class is what is doing the actual operations on this UI. So this is how your framework is currently structured. There will also going to be a lot of supporting components basically. So for example, I'm going to create this could be your configuration. Okay, this could be your config.properties files. Right now it's not there. It's there for API. I'm going to implement this for UI as well. By the way, API is also part of the same project. If you just checked in the feature folder, you see API test cases and its implementation. And we have already automated 20 test cases for it. Right. So something similar we'll also do in this in UI called as config.properties. Then you can say I have another component of reporting. So this is extend report. This is implicitly being implemented by a Cucumber adapter. So you don't have to actually implement any reporting thing. All you do is scenario object, which you actually pass. Okay, scenario object is right now defined here. So let me draw that as well. This is your Cucumber scenario object of Cucumber. Right, it's not really object, it's an interface of Cucumber. And this is what you are passing down the line. So you are passing this from step definition class. This is where it's getting injected by Cucumber. And then you are kind of passing it inside your page object model layer, right? And I think driver is also, you are kind of currently creating here. So I think driver is also being created here. And this driver, you are kind of passing it to the page object model layer. Right, and this page object model layer, you are then passing the driver to your interact class. All right, so this is the complete overall picture I am trying to present to you. This is going to be modified little bit because we are going to implement DI concepts and few more concepts, and so little bit nothing will be modified, but some additions from here and there. It's going to happen in this particular diagram, but more or less this is how your framework works. So this is something which you can also use to explain what is a framework, how the framework works. Can you explain the structure of a framework? So you can very well use this kind of diagram to explain what's really happening in your framework. Just remember what we have drawn here, and I will just again go back to my desktop to show you all this part. So see, this is a search.feature, your first layer. You go inside, this becomes your second layer. This is your search step definition file, and this is the scenario object, and this is the driver object. You are passing scenario object, driver object to the second layer, which is your page object model layer. So common page object, and you're passing driver as well as scenario object inside this common page object. So if I go inside this is your third layer, right? Inside this third layer, you are setting the driver, you are setting the scenario object, and then for performing the operations, you are actually calling the interact class method. This becomes your fourth layer, and this is the layer where it is actually interacting with the UI, right? So it goes to all the commands which you write here, like send keys, etc., and all the implicit weight, explicit weight which you implement is going to be used inside these methods. And all the interaction operations, as the name suggests, all the UI interactions will be part of this class. One last thing which I have also implemented is this log4j. I'm not going to talk more about log4j as of now. All you have to learn is how will you implement it. So you can very well do it using by adding a XML file here called as log4j2.xml. This has to be, the name has to be the same. You cannot just name it anything. It has to be log4j2.xml. It should be part of your resources. So it should be directly under under resources. Once you add that, then you also have to, inside your POM file, you also have to add these two dependencies, log4j API 2.13, log4j-core 2.13.1. So these two dependencies are required. So first file is this, second are these two dependencies. Once you are done with these two, of course it will take some time to download. Once that is also done, then you're going to write a statement something like this. So private static final logger is a class inside log4j library, then name of the variable log manager.getLogger, and here you're going to write the name of the class. So this is how you define the logger variable. No matter on which wherever you wish to implement this in whatever class, you need to define it this way. Only change that would happen is to that in this particular section you will have to write the name of the class and then apply .class extension to it. Okay, so this is how you're going to define, and then once you do this, your logger will be initialized, and then you can actually use it to log the information. As I said, I am not really explaining how log4j and what log4j is. All I'm asking you to do is to implement it first. Okay, and then slowly, gradually, we will have another session on log4j and how to implement it, and why it's used, and what is the benefit of it. We'll talk about it later. I have to tell you about this because without this library will not work for you. And I have actually used log4j here for logging purposes of this library, right? So I had to do it. So you also will have to learn how to implement it, how it actually works, what part, and all those things about log4j. We'll talk about it later. All right. So I think I've explained about this recent structure, recent changes which I've done. The next video which we are going to talk about would be about DI, dependency injection. So we are going to use that Pico container class which we have, or library which we had added there earlier. This is for dependency injection. I have given a good enough definition or use case for this in my previous video where I implemented this for my APIs. So these APIs, I've already implemented this DI called as test context. I'm injecting at runtime. But we're going to do that again because there are a few people who are not followed this API part. So I'm going to create or maybe talk about this DI, dependency injection concept again for implementation into our UI framework. Okay, so that would be it. Thanks.